everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Game Audio Hour, our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets, and here's where you're going to find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. Our panelist for this special edition is Vince and Mike, and I'll introduce the guests at the end, but I'm going to start with Vince. How's it going, buddy?
It's going okay. Just another dry and hopefully not too hot day in LA. Yesterday's little splash of rain was. I wish we could have had more of that. We really need it. But hey, it's LA. I can't complain.
One drop's better than none, I suppose, huh?
Yeah.
And
Infinitely better.
Over to Mike. Did you get more rain than Vince since you're, I don't know, 2 miles away?
I didn't see any rain, but since my air conditioner has been repaired, I just stay inside all the time and appreciate what I have.
And over to our special guest, the alien behind the screen, John Broomhall, joining us from England. Hey, John.
Hello. Hey, Carl. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's great to be with you guys. Hi, Vince. Hi, Mike.
Hi. Nice alien. XCom, huh?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a cool thing, actually. This is a standee from the original release of the game, which you guys knew as This was in America. It was called XCom Enemy Unknown. Or I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
Yep,
I remember playing that.
Anyway, over here it was UFO. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It's so long ago. But yeah, this is. I actually rescued this pretty much from a skip. You know, this was going to be thrown away. It's such a beautiful. Let me move it over. Beautiful piece of art. You know. So yeah, that's sits in my studio and inspires me the whole time.
That is awesome. I bet you it was a blast working on a sci-fi game that long ago.
Oh, it was great because. You know, the X-Files had come out. I was a big fan of the X-Files, and the XCOM game just seemed to really conjure up this mood. I mean, that's where the music came from. I mean, it was a real honor to write the music for it, but I had no idea it was going to be such a massive game. But it just oozed this sort of atmosphere, even though, and it's interesting that it was. All that time ago, the graphics were so rudimentary, you know, but there was this atmosphere about the thing, and it kind of told me what the music should be like, you know. So yeah, it was a great project to work on, and I have a few more of these kind of memorabilia things kicking around from those days, which are great to have. I'm really glad I picked them up, you know.
Oh man, well, you know, let's start there. Do you mind telling us the history of when you first started writing for video games, and you know, even what are some of your favorite video games from your youth that made you think, I want to go do this?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, my story wasn't really like that. I played Space Invaders in the pub, you know, but I didn't. I wasn't really into games. I had an Atari because Atari STs were the home computer that everybody over here, at least anyway, used for MIDI sequencing in the very early days of MIDI. So there were a couple of games on that. I think, was it Star Glider or Star? Star.
I can't think of it.
Yeah, anyway, it was, you know, like 3D geometry graphics, you know. So yeah, I enjoyed all those things, but really my interest at that point hadn't taken me really into games. I worked as a keyboard player and writer of music. My story doesn't really involve kind of aspiring to write music for games at that time. In fact, the world of games was something of a surprise to me. I mean, I was writing music for jingles and soundtracks. I was playing keyboards on people's albums, that sort of thing. But I saw an advertisement for a job. Well, actually, it wasn't even a job. It just said, amongst a whole bunch of other things, 3D artists, programmers, whatever, at the bottom, we're looking for somebody interested in MIDI and knows about synths and stuff. And that was all it said. So anyway, it turned out they were looking for a composer, but they were trying to kind of filter out all the people who wouldn't be technical. So yeah, I applied. I inquired about it, and after a long, long time and lots of demos, finally got a job as in-house composer at Microprose. But that was really kind of a culture shock, because I came from SSL, 2-inch tape back then, outboard gear, and suddenly, wow, there's a sound card like an FM 8-bit sound blaster and a Roland LAPC1, the kind of posh sound card, and the PC beeper, So it was kind of a culture shock.
Oh wow, man, those are the old days.
Yeah.
Well, I can relate though. I mean, I came from a similar background of big boards and 2-inch tape into game audio, so I know what you're talking about. So then you started writing at Microprose, and then of course that led to XCom right there. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah. And certainly, I was just going to say that, like, it is literally from sound card to symphony, right? As you know yourself, then, because it really was music was kind of so rudimentary in terms of technology back then, and yet it's amazing how it's kind of really got into gamers' heads even from back then. But now, yeah, symphony recording, and it's an amazing journey it's come on. I mean, for me, a Microprose in those days, so what happened next? Well, lots of writing music for games, but then I kind of became, cut a very long story short, I became a manager of the process, and so I managed a small sound department internally, and then we were starting, I mean, the content requirements were just mushrooming, it was ballooning, the whole thing. The number of games and the scope of the content. So we then started outsourcing a lot of game music, and that is when I met James Hannigan, the co-founder of Game Music Connect, all those years ago.
Wow, what year was that? Do you remember?
That's got to be late 90s is my guess, or maybe 2000, early 2000, possibly.
And you guys have worked together many times since then, all the way up to Game Music Connect?
Not many times. In fact, he wrote a beautiful theme for this game that we had in production, and I guess it was quite revolutionary at the time. The game was kind of like a Sims type thing, and it spanned over a whole year. So I kind of thought it'd be really cool to get 4 different composers to write each of the seasons. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
great idea.
I did one of them, I can't remember. David Punchin did another of them. And James, we gave him Autumn, because it's like really wistful, and kind of quite mellow and sad and sort of changing the season, quite atmospheric. And he wrote this beautiful music, and then the game got canned.
Oh, no. Oh, well, hopefully you could reuse the music in other games.
Then many years later, he wrote the music for Grand Prix 4. Grand Prix 4 is the Jeff Crammond Formula 1 simulation. So he wrote the music for the last one of those and did a great job. It was absolutely beautiful.
Well, he's a super talented guy. And amazing. So, John, can you tell us more about the Game Music Connect Symposium? Yeah,
sure. Okay, so Game Music Connect is the result of many, many conversations and contacts with James over the years. So yeah, we work together, but also we've spent many an hour talking about music for games. And I think there's a lot of great conferences and activity around game audio, but there didn't seem to be something that really was there to celebrate and explore game music itself. You have some awesome things like we have Video Games Live come over, and then there's other concerts in Europe playing video game music. That's cool. But a conference that would maybe, pull things apart a little bit, pull the curtain back, show people what goes on, and talk about why we have music in games, what it's all about, what we should be aspiring to do, how we're trying to respond to the events and actions in a game to be like interactive music, but also like touch on the business stuff and how do people get a foothold in this thing, and what are the opportunities, and so we just have some very realistic and I hope revealing conversations with some of our guests. I've got to say, some of the best of video game talent from around the world. I mean, like last year we had people like Marty O'Donnell was there. This year we've got Garry Schyman. I mean, the list goes on. So.
And it does. The speakers list is just beautiful. I'm looking over it right now. There's just so many amazing people going to be at this. I wish I could have made it last year. I hope to make it next year, and I'm sorry I didn't make it this year because last year it was talked about, and I got on Twitter and I said, "Oh my God, I got to go to this next year." And I think it was you who tweeted me back to say, "We look forward to seeing you next year," but then I wasn't able to make it. But at least I got this, so I appreciate you at least being on our show and letting us talk about it with you. One of the things. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say 1 year is shoddy, but 2 years is just careless.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I've been called far worse. That's true. Hey, before I hog anything, I want to get Mike and Vince in here because I know they've got some questions too.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of, obviously quite a few conferences and conventions over the years, and just this last year I made it out to Game SoundCon, which is here in Los Angeles, and I was kind of wondering, about, how you see Game Music Connect in relation to some of these other conferences that are around, things like GDC and Game SoundCon, and where you might see this progressing to in a few years' time.
Wow, yeah. Just a tiny question there, then.
Yeah, just a little.
Yeah, well, I guess so. First of all, is geography, right? Then, so there's really not a lot of things like. I mean, Game SoundCon I've never been to, but obviously I know Brian, and that is an awesome conference, and wow, we're just full of admiration for what they do and the scale of it. It's great. So yeah, we see Game SoundCon as our friends, and wow, they cover a lot of ground in what they do. So I mean, the scale of what we're doing is much reduced. In terms of scope, it's really looking mainly at music. And of course, geographically, I mean, there isn't a Game SoundCon in the UK. The only other thing I can think, because I haven't been to Game SoundCon, it's really hard to answer that question. GDC, we have the Develop Conference over here, which I chair the Develop Conference in Brighton in the UK here. And again, you think, well, is this going to clash with that somehow? Which is a thing that's very, very dear to me. I've been involved with Develop Conference for like 10 years. But I think really Game Music Connect is just purely about music. It's outward-facing to aspiring composers and composers who maybe are working in TV and film. They're really interested to know what's going on. It's aimed at music executives and kind of a bunch of people. It's kind of looking from the industry out rather than us talking as the industry within. And it's also very, very much to champion the art form as we see it of game music. So that's why, I won't kind of sidetrack the question, but just to say we're really excited that we have the biggest UK classical music station, Classic FM, are covering the conference, are doing a special program about it, are partners, and also the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, BAFTA. They are supporting the conference this year too. So I think it seems like there's this appetite to kind of talk about the subject, and I don't really see it as clashing with our friends at Game SoundCon or GDC. It's I think it has its own niche, particularly over here in Europe.
Oh,
right.
More the better too in that case.
Oh.
Yeah, it does really make me surprised that this is the first time that, like you say, there's an appetite there, and this is really the first time. Last year with Game Music Connect was really the first time to really attempt to state it. Especially since... Oh, go on.
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, yeah, it surprised me too in a way. I mean, certainly it was a great surprise, and I just remember the warmth from last year when we it's my job, you know, to take the stage, stand up there, and say, "Hey, welcome to Game Music Connect." And there was a round of applause and this kind of cheer, you know, and it was like, wow, this is great. You know, people really are up for this. Sorry, Wayne.
Oh no, we have that with the lag. It happens all the time. No apologies necessary. Mike, I know you had a couple of questions you wanted to ask too.
I did, and Vince stole most of them, so I'm going to fall back on my second tier of questions, which are still fascinating. Don't worry. John, you've described the event as a symposium, and I'm curious what the focus is of the various presentations. Is it biographical? Are we hearing the background and story of the composer guests, or is it more nuts and bolts how-to, or business? What do you find that the focus of the topics tends to be?
Okay, so I'm just looking up the program here to kind of help me as an aid memoir, but let me start by saying, first of all, we have the amazing Steve Schnur from Electronic Arts, and he's going to give a keynote. And he, do you guys know Steve Schnur?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's, I've worked with him before in these kind of situations, and he's just awesome. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say, because you know he's a guy who's made quite an impact on our world, and he has. He's very inspirational, you know, when he talks about game music. I think he's got a big vision and a big job, and people, you know, definitely want to hear what he has to say. So he's opening the show, which is I'm so looking forward to. I'm really stoked that he's doing it. And then the next session is a session called Meet the Composers, which all of our guests, I think there's 6 or 7 composers, including, I'll see if I can get them all, Garry Schyman. You can fill this in if I get this wrong afterwards, right? But Garry Schyman, Jessica Curry, Jason Graves, Richard Jakes, James Hannigan, of course, David Hausman, Olivier Deriviere, I hope I said his name right, and I'm sure there's one more. I'm going to get into trouble, but
No worries. I will also add the names.
Anyway, they're all stars. You know, we're just so grateful that they're all able to come, and you know, from very different places, some of them too. You know, in terms of their experience and what kind of games they've worked on, but they're all exceptional in their world. You know, so it's for me, it's just a great pleasure to take the role of, you know, chat show host and sit down with these guys and ask them about what they do and why. And how. So, going back to the question, I'm still looking up the program here. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I see you've got score to studio and indie game revolution or renaissance.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So, well, going back to the question, there's a mixture of sessions, right? From what we experienced last year, there were some things that were really, very, very popular. And that was interactive music and demonstrations of interactive music. So bearing in mind this is not addressed to like a GDC crowd, right? There's a lot of people attending who write music but have no idea really what interactive music is about. First of all, you know, what are we trying to achieve with interactive music? What are the challenges of non-interactive medium, a non-linear medium, I mean, that we're trying to address with so-called interactive music? And then looking behind the scenes at kind of technically how that's done, whether it's kind of vertical layering or horizontal, you know, kind of segmentation of stuff and delivering at runtime stems and motifs and, you know, stings and all these kind of techniques. And then I suppose there's a whole interesting conversation is that why are we trying to do all that, you know, and that relates back to, I guess, the grammar of film music. And I guess, you know, all of us can remember a time in the industry when it seemed like composers, and the industry, the music within the industry was really trying to chase like the coattails of film composers, and apply what worked in a movie to a game. But I think nowadays, you know, that's changed a great deal. I mean, the genres of game dictate what happens, but there's lots of interesting conversations to be had from, you know, like so something like, I don't know, Peggle or something through to The Last of Us. Yeah. So that's
very... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To your point, it sounds very friendly to newcomers and beginners and people who are interested in game audio themselves, not necessarily drenched in professional experience. What about someone who's has a few credits, someone who's already done some game music? Do you think that they'd find something at the conference as well to be of interest?
Yeah, I do. I was just going to move on to one of the other sessions, which you mentioned, Carl, just now, Score to Studio. I mean, that someone who's not been through that kind of whole orchestral process, that's I think a fascinating session.
Absolutely.
And I think also the indie, the kind of indie game session, which, you know, it's so interesting what's happening in that kind of space, and such great work being done. And I think it reminds me a lot of, in a way, like those formats remind me of going back to the XCom days, right? You know, pushing the boundaries of technology all the time, being able to deliver more and more content. I mean, that's why kind of I'm interested in this question. Is music on iPhone games and iPad games and Android tablet games? Is this a revolution in game music, or is it just like kind of almost like a renaissance? I suppose the key differentiator right now is that people have a lot better tools to work with on these formats than we did back in the day on you know, kind of like PCs of the mid-90s and onwards. I mean, there are quite a few, going back to your question, Mike, there's quite a few people signed up to come who I know are games industry composers. And I think it's always just interesting to hear other people's experiences and you know, compare notes, I guess. You know, so yeah, I think there's something for everybody, but I guess primarily, like I said, it's kind of outward facing. Yeah.
You know, I wanted to ask also, after the conference is complete, will you guys be releasing any of this like onto YouTube for people to view?
We've no plans to do that right now. That raises a whole bunch of other issues, which I won't bore you with here, but that's something that we wanted to look at, but it's not something that's on the cards right now.
Gotcha. Oh, sorry about that. I probably should have thought about all the complications that would have to come with that before asking the question. Vince, I know you had some more questions. I've got some too, but I don't want to hog the forum.
Well, in a previous episode, we were actually talking a little bit about networking, and I'm just wondering, over at Game Music Connect, besides all the sessions that you have, what do you see as the space and time that's available for people who want to network in and outside of the symposium?
Sure. Well, okay, it is. I mean, it's a packed day. It goes by pretty quick from judging from last year, but so the breaks, you need the breaks for the break stuff, But there was obviously right from the outset a whole bunch of connections being made. I mean, we call it Game Music Connect. I mean, there was definitely a lot of people connecting and talking in the breaks, and then afterwards we have a kind of actual organized, we're going to hang around here for a while right outside the hall. And then when that kind of came to an end, there was a whole bunch of people went off to one of the local bars, including some of our composer guests, and they hung out the rest of the night. So yeah, networking definitely in a really cool way. I should tell you about the venue because the South Bank is the South Bank Centre on London's South Bank of the river, right, River Thames. It's such a cool place. It's a really arty kind of place. You have the sense like this is where the zeitgeist is, of what's going on in the arts. So it's such a great place to be, and then to be talking about game music, and then just to spill out of the hall and go and have a beer on, looking over the river and carry on talking about game music. Really cool. Yeah, brilliant.
That's awesome. Well, I wanted to also throw back a little bit to some Forza 5 stuff, because you and Vince were talking about that in the green room beforehand, and well, I know we're all big fans, but Vince has a particular love of that game.
Yeah, I'm just such a racing simulation guy.
Okay.
And I actually started out with a racing simulation game in America that was called World Circuit, and I guess elsewhere it was called F1 Grand Prix, which is I just loved that game, and that got me onto other series like, well, Gran Turismo going into the late 90s, and of course Forza. And you have worked most recently on Forza.
Yeah, and I don't know whether I said, Vince, but I actually worked on World Circuit too, and the Jeff Crammond games, which were of their time. You know, they were definitely simulations. You know, I mean, they weren't games as such. You know, and that game went the world over and sold millions and millions of copies through its iterations. And you know, I guess Formula One isn't like that big in the States, right?
Yeah, it was. It used to be big. I mean, when World Circuit was around, I remember watching the Grand Prix in Phoenix, Arizona at the time. And
okay, well, I mean, over here, you know, it's huge and it's just massive. And I guess it would be like IndyCar. I would guess. I don't know much about IndyCar, but yeah, Formula One is huge over here, and you know, it was the go-to racing simulation. And you know, there's so many stories I could tell you. I spent such a lot of time like trackside trying to record Formula One cars, which is really very difficult.
Wow.
In fact, have we got time for a story about that? I don't know how much time.
We have all the time in the world.
Well, I remember. Oh, cool. Okay. Well, I remember turning up with 5 different rigs to a Formula One test circuit, and we were embedded with a team called the Arrows team, who were, you know, on the up. They weren't the most successful team, but they were on their way up, and so they were really good to us. You know, we spent such a lot of time with those guys, recording sound, getting images and stuff. I was very involved with a lot of video recording as well, which we did with them. So anyway, I remember going along, had 5 different recording rigs, and I was put with the comms guy, and I was told he'll have a look at what you got. He said, lay them all out on this table, I'll come have a look. So this is in my mind, our one shot at recording a Formula One car, actually getting a microphone or microphones on the car.
Wow.
Unheard of. I don't know if it had even been done then. You know, it was so difficult to get into that world. And so he came along the line of equipment, and he said, okay, first one, nah. Number 2, nah. Number 3, no. Number 4, are you kidding? And he said, like, number 5, maybe. He said, so yeah, you know, maybe we could put this little recorder. It was a tiny digital recorder about this big, called a Scoopman, a Sony Scoopman, which actually had tiny little cassettes. It was a digital recorder, 32 kilohertz, really weird thing. I've never seen one since. And so he said, yeah, we could maybe put that in the side pod of the car, you know, with a microphone in there. And yeah, he said, you'll need some double-sided tape. You got some double-sided tape, right? It's like, you know, I think I have everything except double-sided tape. And this was like the epiphany for me, right? This is when I realized these guys are just crazy. He said, he tut-tutted, you know. Amateur. Okay, come with me. And we went into the back of a Pantechnicon Formula One massive truck. And he opened the double-sided tape drawer. And there's, I swear, like every double-sided tape known to man in this drawer, you know. And it's kind of, it's a weird story, but it's just at that moment, you look around you and you realize there's a clean room where they could rebuild the engine at that time. They let them do that. And, you know, and then you start to put it all together. You know, you'd be waiting to get access to the car to get to the recorder and get a tape out. And there'd be a delay, and you'd be saying, well, what's happening? You know, and they're like, oh, we're just rebuilding the gearbox. And these guys just are the pinnacle of, you know, motor racing engineering, absolutely amazing. So yeah, and you know, let me tell you, because you look like you may have been around rock and roll a bit, Carl. I mean that in a bad way. But so we tried a few different microphones, right? Which microphone that you know of do you think would cope with a Formula One car which broke with most of the equipment we put on the car?
There isn't one.
There is.
I would. What is it?
It's the most rock and roll mic in the world.
The SM57.
57?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, Formula One, and you know, yeah, the simulation was amazing, and I've seen like race engineers, data analysts working with Jeff Crammond, you know, to adjust the settings of the game. Quite extraordinary, the respect they had for him. You know, so that was World Circuit, but
Wow.
so it's a long way from Forza. I mean, and literally sound card to symphony in terms of music, because the music for Forza 5 was you know, a pretty big deal. So let me tell you, first of all, my first involvement with Forza was Forza 4, and Nick Wiswell needed someone to record Jeremy Clarkson over here in the UK, in London. So I had this great honour of doing that, which was great fun, kind of scary, but really good. He was excellent. And then, yeah, I was involved as a music supervisor, but also with like the second composer, the co-composer, alongside Lance Hayes, who's kind of Mr. Forza music. I guess you would know this, Vince. Mm-hmm. So Lance is amazing, and so it was just a great honour to be part of that and to write about 30 minutes of the music. And then that music was recorded with Skywalker Sound. Skywalker Sound, and then choir at Avatar in New York. We had MD Gordy, amazing percussion player, who recorded at Sonic Fuel in LA. And so yeah, it was a big production. Quite a long way from World Circuit.
Yeah. I still can't get over that an SM57 can handle the sound of a Formula One. That's amazing.
It's the truth. I tell you, if you remind me, I'll send you a photograph of that. But yeah, going back to Forza, I mean, my interest in them is obviously kind of has been in the music of Forza, but I'm also fascinated by what Nick Wiswell and Chase Coombs. I'm just going to move a little bit because I can see the sun is kind of right on me.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. By the way, you wanted to know about this instrument behind me, right? We'll come to that.
Yes, please. That organ is. I won't let you forget. That is a gorgeous organ.
Okay, so yeah, I'm also very interested in the sound treatment of Forza as well, because Chase Coombs, the audio lead, and Nick Wiswell, the creative audio director, you know, they did some very interesting things with that, and it's probably a kind of discussion for another time. But in terms of, I think, you know, game audio's journey has sort of gone from originally symbolic sound, back in the Sound Blaster days, bleeps and bloops, through to kind of scientific approach. But then now I think, you know, it's moved on to more of a dramatic approach as well. So you've got, you know, those guys literally going to against Skywalker and saying, so how would a film mixer mix our game? What would you do? You know, and kind of analysing the kind of dramatic things that they did with the mix, the choice of sounds, and then applying that back into the game too. So you know, very interesting, very enlightened, very cutting edge for a racing game. So you know, add the music to that and the whole Top Gear thing. It's quite a package, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you all about the reboot of Transport Tycoon.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, wow, that's been a blast. So that was the thing I did straight after, not straight after, but the next big thing after after Forza. So yeah, Transport Tycoon is this crazy, brilliant strategy game from the 90s.
Yes.
Made another kind of Jeff Crammond character, you know, one of these kind of auteurs, you know, a guy called Chris Sweat, who's also responsible for like games like Roller Coaster Tycoon. So this guy is just like crazy genius, you know, to me. And yeah, many years ago, I wrote the MIDI music for this game, and it's probably the only game that, you know, kind of got my jazz groove on, and it just kind of happened that the game just seemed to suggest a certain mood, certain pace, and it so happened that came out in a kind of jazzy way, and they liked it, so we kind of pushed on, and eventually there's about 22, 24 tracks, which just play like a jukebox thing in the background. but it seemed to go down well with people, who played the game, and so there's been this kind of ambition ever since to redo the music, but not MIDI, but do it with real instruments, real players, real up-to-date tech, and that's what the project was, because the game has been rebooted for iOS and Android. I loved it, man. We just, had such a blast playing all this jazz for a game, so.
One thing that's really interesting about Game Music Connect, just going back to that, you have a lot of sponsors there that are listed, and it's, which is, again, really surprising and awesome for this event in its second year. You mentioned already the classical, the classical FMs. Yeah, but there's also BAFTA is a partner with this, and PRS, and Something Music. You have a whole lot of sponsors. I think, especially like BAFTA. I think it'd be really cool to go into what their relationship is.
So we have some amazing partners for Game Music Connect. And honestly, I really just want to thank each and every one of them, because it's wonderful to get that support. And again, I think it kind of demonstrates there's this interest. So you mentioned some of them there, Vince, and not forgetting Audio Kinetic, fantastic partner. And then like the kind of headline sponsors are. So we have Sony Playstation. And especially grateful to them, because this is the second year that they've supported us, and they just, I think what's cool about that for me is okay, we appreciate the financial support, but it's also their support for game music, their championing of the cause, their wish to evangelize and support this kind of area of games. I think that's pretty cool coming from Sony PlayStation, so that's excellent. And then we have Cool Music, who are a talent agency and have their own orchestra, and they're going to take part in the event too. Daryl Alexander, very interesting guy, so he's going to be taking part in Scorch Studio. Very, very knowledgeable, So, yeah, fantastic partner. And also then we have Spitfire Audio, who of course are the wonderful makers of all of our favourite, sample libraries, orchestral libraries.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, for us it's kind of humbling to have these kind of best of breed, partners, and we're very, very grateful to them.
Absolutely, and that is quite a list. I am a big fan of so many, obviously, but Spitfire gets me really excited. I think they make one of the best libraries I've ever heard.
So, yeah, for sure. We're really proud to have them on board.
Can you tell us more about what's going to be discussed during the indie music session?
Yeah, for me it's going to be a very interesting discussion, which I'm going to kind of co-chair with James. And it's interesting because both James and myself, have been doing quite a lot of quotes indie games stuff recently. I think, in a way, what is indie game music anyway? I mean, it's just music, right? It's just great music. So we have to be careful with that, it's not like a different tier of game music. It's great game music, and the people who are doing it are great composers. So I think the interesting thing for me is the nature of the productions, right? So when you get a smaller scale thing with a smaller scale team, maybe a very strong unified vision, but maybe more creative freedom within that to kind of do your thing, that kind of reminds me a lot of the days of writing music for XCom and Transport Tycoon, because guys like me were given quite a lot of freedom to explore and also time, and I think therefore we see the indie game sector so as a sort of hotbed of creativity, and I think that's probably true. And what we want to talk about, I think, is why, and actually see how that relates back to the world of console games too, because I guess in the world of sequels, blockbuster sequels, I guess people are going to be risk averse, and that's understandable. But it's an interesting conversation, I think, to be had about what's going on in the indie game sector, where you have the likes of, I don't know, Device 6 up against The Last of Us for best audio, with the BAFTA awards. You got like Dear Esther, up against Journey and other massive titles, in the BAFTA awards for music. So, yeah, I'm really interested to talk about creativity, the makeup of teams, the nature of projects, and the culture of development, and why that does. And sometimes maybe even the budgetary and even technology constraints, as I'm sure we all know in this conversation, actually sometimes that really promotes something amazing to happen.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you guys are covering so much at this conference. Nice. Well, I tell you what, John, I don't have any more questions except for one. But before I ask, I wanted to see if Vince had anything he wanted to bring up.
I think that's great. I'm really I actually just recently went to the UK earlier this year for the first time, and I know I want to go back, so I think I'm going to hit Game Music Connect next year.
Cool.
Let's sync up our times. We'll go at the same time.
Hey,
we would really love for you to come. I mean, that'd be great.
It'd be awesome to attend. So, John, what's happening now?
Okay, well, I'm working on a project which is something I can't talk about right now, but it involves creating sound design and music for a sort of episodic thing. Game-related, but not a game. So it's all a bit under wraps at the moment, but it's really good. It's really stretching me to some new places creatively, which I'm really enjoying. But also the other thing I've been doing is especially because of the interest in Transport Tycoon, is creating more jazz tracks. So I just actually released a couple of jazz tracks, the names of which are an homage to my colleagues on Forza, which is Blues for Wiswell and Cut to the Chase, and they're available from my Facebook page, CD Baby. So John BroomhallMusic on Facebook, iTunes, Amazon, it's all there. So and I really want to do more of that, because it's really nice that my interest in jazz, it made it into a game in the first place. That's great. And then to have it rebooted all these years later, and I guess the MIDI version, there's lots of hacked MIDI versions out there on YouTube of this music, and honestly, some of them aren't so great. So it's kind of that's putting it lightly. And I've always thought, it would just be great to make definitive versions of them, And so having had the chance to do that, it's like, well, why wouldn't I want to make some more music like this, just for fun and pleasure? And it's a great excuse to collaborate with people, So that's the secret project, plus more jazz, plus more articles, plus more Game Music Connect. It's a machine that keeps rolling, but we roll with it.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I wanted to direct everybody who's listening and not watching to go to GameMusicConnect.com. If you're in the area, please do sign up for this awesome conference. It's going to be fantastic, and I'm going to be extremely jealous that you have gone and I have not. John, thank you so much for being here.
Guys, thank you very much for having me. We really appreciate the support for Game Music Connect. Thanks for all the cool stuff you've said about it. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I really, really hope you'll be there next year. Take care.
We will make sure we do so. Sorry, Vince, I stepped right on your line.
No problem. It's this was a really fun conversation, and I'm looking forward to having some fun over there next year.
Take care, guys.
All right, John. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.